Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, Reality Check. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I got my subs up, starting to get better and better. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Um, we're living in a world of fear right now, and a lot of people don't realize it. And it's like we're living in a fear farm. And the whole point of our establishment cabal is to create as much fear as they can so that we're constantly living in fear. About a year ago on this show, uh, we had on Robert Phoenix, and he told us about what he thought was going to happen in the coming year of 2020. And a lot of people commented, "Oh man, you're so dark," and "Oh man, that was really depressing," and "Oh, that's not, none of that's going to happen." And you know, even I had my doubts. I got to be honest with you. Even going into late January of 2020, I was thinking, "Oh my God, Robert, it's not going to happen." And then it happened, and it was worse than he said. It's still worse than he said. They're shutting
Yeah,
down the whole country again. Anyway, they're
yeah.
rioting.
I was kind of soft pedaling that for people. By the way,
Pardon me.
I was soft selling that for people. By the way.
Yeah, you were. Now we know. So let's talk about let's talk about what's going to be happening here. It's going, some really seriously, strange conjunctions coming, and I'm very concerned about it because maybe my research is wrong, so you can correct me, but it seems to me that I'm finding out that the last conjunction like this was in 1623. Is that right?
Let me see. I have it up here,
Okay.
and it's very close to 1623. You see if I can grab it on
Which
the.
was, by the way, the year that we were going into the mini ice age.
Let me see if I can find it. I've got a bunch of
If
other
it is
stuff
that
up
year.
here. Oh, it's on my other computer. So the last time that I would, so really the last time we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was 1962.
Right,
And that was, of course, the sort of the midterm of Kennedy.
right.
And then from that point forward, he's got what about less than a year after that. And of course, we know what happens after that. And that 1962 chart is going to pretty much replicate itself for January 20th, the inauguration of this year. We're getting pretty much the same chart as that 1962 chart. And Jay, you might remember this. That was a chart that I actually talked about when I was at Gaia. And I think that was one of the charts that helped usher my swift exodus from Gaia, because I was talking about the Antichrist chart,
Right.
and that was the February. It was the February 5th chart of 1962, when we have this massive stellium in Aquarius, and so it's coming around again, and it's on the inauguration, right? That's kind of a big thing. So that's the last time we had that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. So now I'm going back to is it 1623, which is, let's see,
I think that's when they were really close to each other.
Let's see. We have to go to. I think it was during the Reformation with Martin Luther. That's when we had.
That time.
Yeah, that was the last time that I could find in terms of the. Let's go back here. I was looking at it this morning. That was the last time that I could find where there was the same conjunction, but it was far apart. It wasn't that close. It was probably about a 20-degree separation in the orb. So let's just go back and look at that period of time.
What does that mean, though, when they have a conjunction? What's the general consensus on what
So
happens?
the conjunction is when two planets get together,
yeah,
and theoretically they're in the same geocosmic neighborhood together. They're sharing the same space together, under the same sign most of the time. You can't have a conjunction when planets are in different signs, as long as they fall within the conjunction range. So I've had a kind of a bit of a controversial theory about conjunctions. And I've always felt that when a planet was in the same sign as another planet, even if it was 20 degrees, there would still be a conjunction. It would be what I would call lesser conjunction, or conjunction that doesn't have as much steam, say from 8 degrees in. So we could still make a case, or I could still make a case for that conjunction that was taking place during the Reformation. So that was kind of a big time. That was really a big time. I think we're looking at around 1534, right around there. Let me just throw that in there really quickly, because I had it on my other computer this morning, and I was playing around with this. So let's go 1534. And if you look at that time, I mean, that's a little bit after that. It's a very significant time, though. Where am I? Let's go back to Martin Luther. That's a super, super significant time, because we're basically getting the entire canon of Western religion and Christianity, going through kind of an Aquarian sort of remake in some ways, right? I mean, it's kind of a big, it's a big deal.
Wasn't very Aquarian. There was a lot of murdering and killing going on. I don't know. That could.
Well, Aquarius is not always warm and fuzzy. I mean, if you go back and look at 1917 during the Bolshevik Revolution, Uranus was in Aquarius. So, and I've looked at when these color revolutions happen or have happened over, since around 2009, 2010. Most of those color revolutions happened during the month of February. So those are timed to be Aquarian events. And the guy that is the father of the color revolution is Gene Sharp. And Gene Sharp is an Aquarian. And his kind of leading protege was Sergeant Popovic, the guy who was responsible for one of the first color revolutions in Europe. He's the guy that started Otpor, Otpor, and he's gone on to basically franchise the color revolutions. You have Saul Alinsky, who's an Aquarian. I mean, we could just see and I'm not saying Aquarians are bad people, but the spirit of revolution is inherent in Aquarius. Even Johnny Lydon, aka Johnny Rotten, who sang about anarchy in the UK, is an Aquarian. So I think Aquarius is kind of neutral, and it tilts with the times. And now we're seeing something very different. And one of the things that I talked about a week and a half ago was Gil Scott-Heron and his famous song, "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised."
Great song.
It's a great song, and he got the message right, but he got the politics wrong.
Right.
Because the revolution was televised. The George Floyd scene, everything post George Floyd, that was like 24/7 in your face trauma TV. But the real revolution is not being televised. Like so Scott-Heron was right. He just got the
wrong revolution.
Exactly. Right. So that's where we are now. And we are in the throes of a revolution. And we have been in the throes of a revolution really since Trump became elected. And that was very clear when Hillary Clinton showed up the next day at her presser to theoretically concede. Both her and Bill were wearing purple.
Right.
There was a reason why they were wearing purple, because they were stating this is the next color revolution. It is the purple revolution. And in California, ironically, the sort of the deepest, darkest corona or COVID zone, they've colored it all off, right? Purple is the worst. You get the purple and you just may as well just be mummified and locked up in your basement. So and when you look at George Floyd and the whole George Floyd thing, it took place in Minneapolis, the Twin Cities. That's where Prince is from. Prince was the Purple Revolution. That was the name of his band. He died on the 21st of April of 21st of May 2016.
Oh, right.
And that was on the Queen's birthday. That's the Queen's birthday. Prince dies on May 21st, 2016, and it's 202 days before Trump gets inaugurated. So, and then that leads right into 2017, which is the 100-year anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. So we've been in a revolution, we have been in a war really since in an open war, an open conflict since 2016, 2017, when Trump gets elected. And when Trump got elected, that night he got elected, Mars went from, guess what, Pisces to Aquarius, right? So everything was just set. Trump has had more key, profound, timely, synced up transits and aspects over any other president I've ever come across. And here we are, we're coming up on the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on, guess what? the winter solstice. And not only that, but we've got a solar eclipse coming, and the solar eclipse is coming right on the day that the Electoral College is supposed to vote. And not only that, it's happening on Trump's moon, which is in Sagittarius, also eclipsed. I mean, can you ask for any more astrological condensation around this stuff? I mean, we are living in profound times.
I remember, I think it was like 2014, you told me at lunch one day at Gaia that Trump had not announced, we didn't have any idea about Trump or anything, but you said, get ready for something to happen after 2016, because there were so many conjunctions and things going on that it's just going to get really weird. And I remember you telling me that, and I thought, and it did get weird. It's been weird ever since.
Oh, and we're just getting into the weird.
Yeah, so
like we're
just
getting into it.
Don't hold back. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, I think it's going to be so. When you and I did this last year, it was pretty clear, right? I mean, for me, it was because we were dealing with this stellium in Capricorn,
right.
And Capricorn is very defined. It is very, very defined. And with the South Node, I knew that there was going to be some massive overreach, but I also knew that things were coming to an end. Like this was it. Like our story, our historical narrative was going to come to an end because these Capricornian entities, the hierarchical gatekeepers, were going to change the game. Like they were going to change the game. And that was pretty clear and evident and obvious, at least it was to me. We get into Aquarius, it is a very different story. And especially with the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. Now, people who are kind of new to astrology, I'll just give you a little bit of a primer. The idea behind Saturn, I'm going to stay out of the mythological kind of interpretation, but the idea around Saturn is it's about compression, right? Saturn gives us gravity and it gives us compression. So when we look back, or when I was looking forward last year, I could see all this compression that was happening. It was like, Jesus Christ, are we going to be able to like deal with this pressure that's coming our way? And so we're seeing this pressure again starting to come into place. Now we bring in Jupiter, which is about expansion. So we have the planet of compression meeting the planet of expansion coming together. So this can go in any number of different ways.
Wow.
Any number of different ways. Number one, we could see that we've already been, by the way, Saturn and Aquarius has already been here. When we started to lock down, that's where Saturn was. It was in Aquarius. It was like, hello, this is Klaus Schwab, and I'm going to tell you about the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I mean, that was Saturn and Aquarius. It was hard and it was global, right? So we've already been here. The difference is Jupiter. So Jupiter can either expand the power of Saturn, which is compressing the entire populace, and Aquarius is the world, right? Saturn can expand that. And these people who are the gatekeepers for the new tyranny or the old tyranny that's being reborn and recast as the Great Reset, they could expand their efforts in order to lock things down. That said, the revolutionary spirit of the people, which is expanding, can take on more structure and order so that they're not just throwing Molotov cocktails in Paris, which is happening right now. Yep. So this is really fascinating to watch because on the one hand, you have this system that's kind of already in place, right? I mean, these guys are already in place. They've had it for a while. They're just trying to roll this thing out, maybe a bit faster than I think they'd like, which is why it's kind of messy right now. And on the other hand, you have this X factor, which is the public, the people who are starting to kind of wake up to this thing. And what the hell is going on here? You know, I mean, people who are watching this probably already have a clue and have had a clue for a while, but there are people now who are just now figuring this stuff out. And it's not people who are, you know, kind of open-minded and kind of, you know, sort of on the fringe. No, these are people who have basically invested in the system, have a lot of money and a lot of capital, but they may not be on the inner circle. They may be about 3 or 4 levels outside the inner circle, and they're freaked out. Like they don't know what to do because they're saying, you know, this could all go away. And now they're kind of waking up to the fact that, you know, the status quo had been good to them before, but it's not going to be their friend moving forward. So this is kind of an interesting development. And one of the things that I stumbled upon last year was, and Jay, you probably know this, that Kurosawa had some very interesting thoughts on the nature of evil, and especially how it kind of manifested in cinema. And he says when evil shows up, it arrives and it doesn't really evolve. Like it is there, it doesn't evolve. However, virtue and goodness, they do evolve. And he always had this formula at play in his movies, The Hidden Fortress, Seven Samurai. You know, starts off with this kind of loose-knit group of people, some of which are into it, some of which are not. And evil has already defined itself, and evil stays there. But what happens is that there's this adaptability of people who are figuring this thing out, and they grow. They grow in virtue, they grow in courage, and they grow to the task of meeting evil as a force. And I think that's some of what this conjunction is going to be about. I think people are going to figure this thing out, and it's like, okay, we're gonna do something. We're gonna have to do something. Meanwhile, they're cutting off all the exits. I was online today, and InfoWars was down.
Yep.
OAN was offline yesterday. So, you know, that's Saturn compressing these Aquarian kinds of channels that we've been working. Like right now, you and I are participating in an Aquarian working vis-a-vis the internet. And Saturn says, okay, well, you know, we've got to continue to, you know, not only thwart this, but we got to throttle this so they can't get the message out. So we're headed into a really interesting time. And all this is happening on the solstice, like the 21st, right? It is the darkest night of the year. Theoretically, and the next day, the light begins to creep back. Well, if we go back all the way to, let's see, it was we got to go to 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Trump was elected in 2016. He got inaugurated in January, but there was something, no, it was 2016. I believe it was when Saturn, it was 2017 when Saturn moved into Capricorn, okay? Moved into Capricorn at 0 degrees. It happened on the winter solstice. Like that's almost unheard of. Like Saturn does not change signs on the winter solstice. It just doesn't. It's like it's one of those things where you go back through the ephemeris, and I went back literally hundreds and hundreds of years. I couldn't find an example of that. Like it's just not there. And what did Trump do on that night? He enacted like 8 executive orders. And one of them had to do with people that were involved in some kind of inappropriate action with, I think it was around trafficking, or it was kind of vague but sort of specific, and it's like very clear that if they found somebody like this, they could completely freeze all their assets. So
that.
He activated 8 executive orders that night. It's also, I think, the time where he signed the tax break, the big tax break into action. So now here we are. It's going to be 2020. 3 years later, we have Saturn again, guess what? Changing signs into Aquarius. And then we have Jupiter coming along for the ride. So it's an interesting link between the two. You know, will we see?
Also mean, doesn't that, I mean, expansion and contraction, couldn't that mean civil war too? I mean,
I think civil war, we're already there.
Yeah.
We're in a soft civil war, and we've been in a soft civil war for a while. And it's going to get less civil. But it's not just going to be here in the United States. You know, we're looking at a global, this thing is going global, and that's what Aquarius does. It goes global.
On my TV right now, there's a gigantic fire in Paris near the Arch de Triomphe. Um, right now, burning
Yep.
right as we speak.
Yep. You won't see it on the U.S. news, by the way.
No.
They won't broadcast any of that. Like if you're not tapped into alternative media and you're watching Rupley, right? You're not going to see it. And that's what they're going to effort to do. They're going to want to take some of these things down. I would not be surprised if we see either blanket or pocketed blackouts of either websites, internet service. I think we're going to have to get used to that moving forward. It's going to be very, very glitchy. Now they can't afford to take the whole thing down, because if they take the whole thing down, they won't be able to transact, and they need to transact. So, but I think it could be specific and at times blanketed vis-a-vis certain areas. And by the way, I don't think it'll be just one group. I think you'll have various groups vying to control or shut down the flow of information. It won't just be, like the globalists, quote unquote, there will be other groups too. So we're in a very interesting time. This is it. This is where humanity, we're either going to flip this thing and we're going to change the planet, or we're going to go into 100 years of darkness. So people need to understand that. And that's really what's at stake right now.
Yeah, and they have a clear rollout of something. There's no doubt that there's every year there's going to be another rollout of another thing. And I think I had Howdy Mikowski on last week. He's the guy that wrote the book about the World's Fairs and the expositions and how strange they are and all the history around it. And he's a historian, so he's not just some guy. He's like got a degree in history and he's a professional historian, and he points out that they're like constantly got a reset going. And that's what is so kind of amazing. And we're both old enough to realize that there are mini resets. The 60s was a mini reset.
Absolutely.
The 80s were a mini reset under Reagan. And it's the course correction things going on. So they go too far over, then they course correct and come back. But this time is the first time that they seem to be going in for all the marbles.
Yeah. This is the big one. Yeah. This is the big reset. You go back to the Great Depression. That was a reset.
Mm-hmm.
It was huge. By the way, I just stumbled upon this event that I had absolutely no knowledge of. You probably do. And it was this thing called the Bonus Army. Do you know about the Bonus Army?
Nope.
I didn't know about this at all. Last night I was watching a biography of Patton, who I generally like. I think he's interesting.
Yeah,
he's into reincarnation and all kinds of stuff, right?
Cool.
Yeah. Now there were Patton was in World War One. He was a tank commander in World War One. He got wounded and pretty badly in his thigh, and one of his guys saved him. Now, apparently, the soldiers in World War I were promised bonuses for fighting, and they were never paid those bonuses.
I do know about this, yes.
So they wound up, and this is during the Depression, and they just wanted to get paid. And what's interesting is the story, the account that I read of this was a guy who was in Portland, of all places, and he was a soldier in Portland, and he basically organized other soldiers to cross the country via train to eventually, and they tried to stop these people, by the way.
Yep.
Like they stopped the trains to try to get these guys off the trains. They got to Washington and they had this little shanty town called Hooverville, which I had no idea. And Hoover was the president, and they wanted their bonuses. And Calvin Coolidge said, "No, we're not going to pay you." And then Hoover said, "We're not going to pay you." Right. So they're gathering force, and they're in Washington. So Hoover summons MacArthur, Eisenhower, and Patton to dispatch these guys. And they go in and they burn down Hooverville. They beat the hell out of these former World War I, soldiers. And the guy that saved Patton actually requested a meeting with Patton, and Patton agreed to that. And he asked him why he did it. Why did he do this? And why couldn't he back, him and the other guys who needed to get paid? And Patton just, disavowed him and kicked him out. And it affected Patton, after that. Like he had a difficult time living with that. Although I'm sure once World War II ran around, it got pushed right to the back of his cranium. But I think this is important for people to understand. There's a reason why I'm bringing this up. It's because the army and the military have a very different kind of mindset. And when they are told what to do, they will do it. And it is very rare that they'll actually side with the people. And all you have to do is go back and look at that event. These guys were part of their fraternity, and they turned on them. And they didn't even have to think twice about it, right?
Right.
So this is a mindset that we're dealing with. This is the Praetorian Guard of the globalists, is the Praetorian Guard of the technocrats. But what they don't understand is that they're limited. They're a limited hang. And if they get what they want, if they do what their masters want them to do, they got about a 5 to 6 year shelf life before they're replaced by the robots and AI and all the other stuff. So they're really just kind of playing out the script. They don't know that though.
No, they don't.
Which is unfortunate.
No.
Oh, by the way, that's Mars too. We've got Mars in Aries right now. That's the other thing, And Mars went direct. It went direct on the Saturday that everybody went to Washington D.C. and decided that they wanted to, support Trump. Over 1 million people, Mars direct. And now we've got this Mars energy right now, and it's coming to square Pluto. It's coming to square Saturn, right? It's coming to square Jupiter. And that's all around the time that the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is happening on the solstice. Holy smokes. We got fireworks in the sky.
Egads, what does that mean? War, I guess, right?
It's not going to be business as usual. We were moving into a very, very different time. Very different time. And it's going to be different in different parts of the world too, right? It's in that, and then we got this eclipse coming up, the solar eclipse on the day of the Electoral College. I think Trump is going to stay in office. That's my sense. I think the tide is moving. I've heard murmurs that even the Biden camp is trying to figure out a way out of this now, because they've been caught dead to rights. The only thing that I'm concerned about is now they're trying to tie this voting stuff to Iran, and I'm not sure I'm in on that. Right? Yeah. I'm not sure. That's the other thing. That's the wild card, is the Iran piece, and it may just be. The Iran thing may be more theater than anything else, because I'm not sure that they really want to go in and completely blow up Iran. I don't think they want to do that. There's too many resources there. There's too much oil there. There's too much gas there. They've got a huge Jewish population in Iran, which a lot of people don't understand. So, I think that they could do something that maybe looks like war or pretext for war, but it may not. It may be one of those things where it's like when Trump shot a missile at a funky place in Syria.
Trump doesn't want to go to war.
No, he doesn't want to go to war, but he's got deals, and he's got people that he's got to deal with on that side of the of the Fertile Crescent. So he's got to fend them off on some level. But we're in very different times. So if you think that we just have to go through another phase of the lockdown and everything's going to be okay, like, you got another thing coming.
Yeah, I think you're right. Everybody's really starting to realize it. They know something's going on, and the more intelligent people are figuring it out. And of course, everybody is putting out articles about how the conspiracy theorists were all correct about everything that's going on. And so, as I said to a person the other day, I don't feel real good about being right about all this.
Nobody does. Nobody does. You'd rather be wrong.
Because I was hoping that I could stop this when I was talking about it all these years. I was hoping that somehow the word would spread, but I never thought that they would do this. That's for sure. I mean, it's really bad. So 80 years ago, 1941, we started World War II, or we joined World War II. It was already started. And then 80 years before that was 1861, which is the first year of the Civil War. And we know the United States goes on that Uranus kind of pattern. And so I'm just wondering, with Mars and Aries and all of that, it sounds like we might be going into some kind of war.
Well, again, I mean, I think we're there. I mean, I think we're already in a war.
Yeah,
We're just not. And what's interesting is that, again, Trump is a Gemini, and it's also fascinating that we have two presidents now, theoretically,
right.
right? And the
Yes.
true node is in Gemini as we speak. But Trump has not engaged in overseas conflicts. I mean, I don't know who was behind that Venezuela thing, which just completely belly flopped. I don't think it was Trump. It was probably Pompeo, and who knows, maybe Haspel. I don't know. I know that Trump likes Guaido, who's another Mason. But other than that, I don't know who was. It was a total disaster. But other than that, we weren't really engaged in any, like, haven't been really engaged in any full-on ground conflict. But we got out of Syria. I know that there's the oil refinery, or the gas and oil in northern Syria. By the way, that goes to Israel. They pump that to Israel. That's where that's going,
That's
and
surprising.
that's guarded. Other than that, we've moved out, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in January there are troops from Afghanistan that are supposed to come home as
Right.
well.
Yep.
So what's interesting is that it's almost like, okay, well, you're not going to go to war overseas. Well, we'll bring the war here to this country, and you have a choice. It's either there or here. So I think a choice has been made on that front. Now, if Biden becomes president, and I'm feeling less and less like that's going to happen, by the way, and if Biden does become president, we will get the overseas wars. We will, but I don't think there's going to be that trade-off. I think we're still going to have conflict here, because people will not recognize a Biden presidency. It's just not going to happen. The majority won't.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I can't see Biden in my mind as president. I haven't gotten there. I can't see it at all. I mean, not even a little tiny bit. And usually I can see these things, like I could see Trump as president, and but I can't see it. But I don't know what's going to happen, and time is running out, so we'll see. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I
It
certainly.
really is. We're really getting down to the 2-minute warning here.
Yeah, and SCOTUS is going to have to get involved, and there's no doubt about that. And you can't trust Roberts, so it could still
Well,
go
Roberts, you
by
could
the board.
you can erase Roberts, you can erase Sotomayor, you can erase Kagan,
Yeah.
and who's the other one?
Breyer.
Breyer. You could just erase those four, right? So now you've got the other five.
Yeah.
Now, of the other five, I think Alito is a conservative. He'll go with
He'll go.
Trump. Thomas will go with Trump,
Yeah.
right? I think Kavanaugh goes with Trump. And now you come down to Gorsuch and Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
Gorsuch is somebody who I think could go either way. He's
I
from
do
your
too.
state, right? He's from Colorado. He could
He
go
was my
either
neighbor.
way,
He was my neighbor in Boulder. He lived like 3 blocks away from me.
right? And
He went to not that this means anything, but he was an usher at our gay church
right.
in downtown Colorado.
Mhm.
So I don't know what that means, but it's interesting.
Right. Yeah. So my theory about Gorsuch was that he was already, like, picked before Trump went into office.
Hmm.
That's my sense, and it wasn't met with a great deal of animosity from the Democrats. They were like, okay, this thing's kind of in. Just like how Roberts was kind of picked before Obama went into office,
Right.
for Obama, right? So, but Coney Barrett is the wild card. And a lot of people just want to rubber stamp her and say, oh, she'll vote conservative. Oh, no. Coney Barrett follows the Pope. She follows this Pope, right? And this Pope is a globalist.
He
He's a
is.
full-on globalist.
He
And
is.
the other thing too that I've noted is that Amy Coney Barrett has Saturn conjunct fixed star Algol, okay, in Taurus. And fixed star Algol has to do with decapitations and beheadings. And Trump has fixed star Algol right on his midheaven in Taurus, which means that Amy Coney Barrett's Saturn sits right on top of Trump's chart. And we are coming into a period where Amy Coney Barrett could be the person who could go thumbs up or thumbs down. Now, she's an Aquarian, by the way.
Oh,
And
no.
and Aquarian rhymes with contrarian. So Amy Coney Barrett could be one of those people where, just to prove
Yep.
that she is not some kind of tool of the right and the conservatives, she might go with the other side. And that would be the guillotine that would come right down on top of Trump. When I saw that, who was being put together or talked about to be the next Supreme Court justice, Coney Barrett has the chart. She has a destined chart. I mean, there's a lot there. I think her true note is conjunct the galactic center in Sagittarius. I mean, hello, right? That's a big deal. But then this Barbara Lagoa from Miami, she would have been the better choice. She would have been a much better choice. And what was interesting about her is that her birthday coincides with the day that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Like, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died on Barbara Lagoa's birthday. And Barbara Lagoa's birthday is one day after the election, when we had the election. So, and she has a ton of stuff in Libra and Scorpio. She's fixed. Like, she would not have been as much of an unpredictable wild card as Amy Coney Barrett. A lot of people think Amy Coney Barrett will just be a good little girl, just go right down conservative and liberal conservative line. No, she won't. And we're going to see more than likely what's going to come up. Now, that's not going to say that she's going to go to the other side, right? But if you got a guy like Gorsuch, who all of a sudden decides he wants to go play on the other side, you got some problems there. You got problems.
He's the guy I'm worried about. Honestly, he's the guy. I just know people that know him here in Colorado, and he's not the person that they're telling us he is. That's all I'm going to say.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And they've had he was involved in two major decisions recently. He was one of the guys that was basically saying, hey, look, Oklahoma's not a state anymore. I mean, give it back they give that part back to the Indians, which people haven't really talked a lot about. And then recently he actually weighed in on the conservative side about the right to practice one's religious faith in public, and actually ruled against Andrew Cuomo, who, by the way, this is interesting, Cuomo just dismissed it. Yeah, Supreme Court, so what?
Yeah,
so what?
Crazy.
Well, why do you think he did that?
I don't know.
Because if they rule for Trump, it's like, Supreme Court, so what? Right? He's setting a precedent.
Gotcha. Right.
Yeah. So we are in crazy times. Crazy times.
Is it going to back off at any point? Like, I mean, are things going to get easier like a year from now, or?
Well, luckily, 2021 doesn't have the same kind of astrological fireworks that 2020 did. So the eclipses in 2021 are centered around Scorpio and Taurus. So that's going to be really interesting, because Scorpio is about where things are hidden, right? They're hidden, they're dark, it's other people's money, deep, dark finances, probably stuff like child trafficking, money connected to child trafficking, all that stuff, right? The South Node's moving into Scorpio, but that's not going to really happen until January of 2022, but the eclipses will change. So we're going to start to have the eclipses in Scorpio and in Taurus next year. So I think we're going to, and in Taurus, that's about the money, and that's about hard assets. And we've got Uranus and Taurus now, and that's a whole other discussion with Uranus and Taurus and what's going on with the economy and assets. And that's, we could probably do an hour show just about that. But I think that the eclipses in 2021 will be quite revealing, because now what we're seeing is the South Node is in Sagittarius, and there's no law anymore. Sagittarius rules law. So we're not seeing any law. Now, when he goes into Scorpio, we'll find out why. We'll find out who's behind everything. And that'll be interesting. Of course, they always have like a, false fire, distraction, or whatever, just when we get about to get close on something. We have two major transits going on with both Jupiter and Saturn, the aforementioned Jupiter and Saturn, both of which are very fast. Jupiter actually moves all the way to Pisces this year. And the cycle for Jupiter is that it had been in one sign for almost the entirety of the year. Like it would get up to around 28 degrees in September. Actually, get around 28 degrees in like around June, July, 26, 27, and then it would retrograde. So to go back and then to go forward, and right around December for the last few years, Jupiter would change signs. This year, it goes into Aquarius, and by the time we're into the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, it's already in Pisces. So we see a very fast moving Jupiter, and then it goes back into Aquarius. So, you know, it might feel like for a period of time that there could be a bit of a truce in some ways, because Pisces is a lot more placid than Aquarius is. But then it goes backwards, and it's almost like, okay, we got to go back again. We're going to have to restart this thing.
Sounds
And then
like
Jupiter
war.
boosts. Then we've got Saturn, which gets to 13 degrees Aquarius by late June. Now, just to give you an example, when Saturn first went into Capricorn, it took Saturn 9 months to get to 11 degrees. And now it's at 13, and it's doing it within the first 6 months of the year. So we're dealing with both very fast Saturn and very fast Jupiter, which says to me that time is speeding up, that events will happen very, very rapidly, and people are going to have a very hard time keeping up with things. So that's going to be an issue for people, and staying grounded. It's going to be very difficult. We got Uranus. The only Earth sign we have is Uranus and Taurus, and that's going to be, you know, it's sketchy. It's not easy to be on Earth with Uranus and Taurus. The other thing too is that Mars, which is in Aries, will be in all the personal signs from essentially January until October of next year. So it means it's going to go through Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo. And those are all very important in that it impacts, you know, like the proletariat, the people. Those are like the people signs. So there's intensity, there's conflict, but there's also an opportunity for people to apply some Mars into those parts of their chart. And those parts of the chart are really based on survival in a lot of ways. You know, once you get past Libra, you're into the more abstract realms of the transpersonal. So this is, if you don't have your shit together by now, you got really, I'd say 2021 to really get all your houses in order, right? Wherever they are. And even though you may have, like I have, my second house is ruled by Capricorn, but the natal ruler of that is still Taurus. So I'm still looking at Mars going through Taurus, even though my natal ruler, or my ruler in my chart, is Capricorn. So, you know, everybody has this year to get that part of their chart and their lives together, from house 1, which is happening right now, to house 6. And by October of next year, the 13th of October next year, we're going to have Mars. It's going to be on the other side of the sun, and it will not be visible. So we're going to get a break from Mars for a while. Okay, but for the entire year, Mars is visible in the sky. And it's going to be really, and when we get Mars in Taurus conjunct Uranus, so that's going to be January, that's another really electrifying time. And it could be a time of very interesting gains if you know what you're doing. It could also be a time where people are shocked around what happens to them financially, and they could have a lot of anger around what takes place. And, you know, and we're just in a very unpredictable kind of zone right now with all that stuff.
A lot of rumors flying around that they're going to forgive everybody's personal debt and give you UBI, universal basic income, and then turn everything digital. And what do you think?
That's a very Uranus and Taurus kind of proposition. Absolutely. But of course, you know, what's the price to pay around that? You know, the price to pay around that is you're going to have to give up everything you own too. You give up your house, your car, you own nothing. And then, of course, if they want you to take a little shot, well, you know, you got to deal with that too. Now, here's where the Saturn and Jupiter come into play, because they're going to be squaring off against Uranus. That is not going to be an easy thing for them to pull off. The only way I think they're going to be able to pull that off is if they force some very hardcore austerity. And that would be cutting off the food supply and making people essentially beg for their new system, which is not out of the question, by the way.
No, I like to use food as a weapon historically. Mm-hmm. And so I'm looking at that too. And then there's also, you know, it's not really astrology, it's more astronomy, but the fact that all the giant planets are all on one side of the sun, you know, causing all these conjunctions and things to happen, but also it's pulling the Earth slightly out of its orbit and further away from the sun, at least for a little while. So you got to wonder if that's going to have some effect on things too.
Oh, I think so. And that really peaks on the 21st, by the way. And they call that the anomaly. And that's going to be a very interesting again, I mean, astrologically and astronomically, we are in a different part of the universe. Like, we have never been here before. This
Yeah.
is new territory with the outer sky and the inner sky for all of us. And the faster that you can kind of move into this new time, the easier it's going to be. And I think, and I've been preaching this for a while. You've got, people just need to let go of the past. I'm sorry, it's not coming back.
Right. It doesn't
We're,
exist.
we're never going to come back to whatever it was we were doing before. It's not going to happen. You know, I live in a fairly small town, which really has kind of maintained its economic base to some degree, but there was a really cool little family business here in this town, and they ran the theater in this town, and they had about like 4 or 5 different theaters inside their facility. You could go there and get a pizza, get a glass of wine. They also had an amphitheater in back to go see live performances. That family business is
All
gone.
gone. All
It's
gone.
gone. Yeah.
Yep.
It'll
And it's
never
not coming back.
Nope.
It's gone. Concerts are gone. Movies are gone. And you know what's bullshit about the movies is there's nowhere better to do the social distancing than in a movie theater. You can put stuff in the seats to make sure that people can't sit in them. There's just, no, I'm sorry. It's just, I could configure a movie theater and 300 seat theater and still get 120 people in there and have everybody be 6 feet apart. I looked at, I've already figured it out. I'm telling you, there's no way that can't be done. So they're doing it on purpose. They're destroying.
They could do the same thing with the NFL.
Yep.
And the stadiums, but they're opting not to have any fans in the stands, right? And so it's like, what is the impact of something like that? Well, think of all the jobs that go along with that.
Yep.
You know, think of the people that would actually, you know, have the trucks that would bring the candy bars or the popcorn and all the stuff to the movie theaters and the stadiums. Well, they're not driving to those places. Think of the companies that would manufacture that stuff. They're not manufacturing it. Think of the, you know, the product to actually create a movie, Jay, which you know about, the crew and everything that goes along with that. The manufacturing, the prints, the distribution. I mean, it's a whole industry and gone.
It's even worse because I know someone who's in production in Hollywood, and they were shooting the film, and somebody tested positive, and they had to shut down the entire shoot. And they had rented all the sets and the studios and the space. And I don't know if the movie business can survive, is what I'm trying to say.
It won't survive. It won't. But here's what they want. Here's what they want. They will survive if their version of the reset happens. And then Hollywood will resume its place in our world, but it will be telling stories about the reset. It will become a propaganda wing, much like what happened with Stalin and Russia and all the films that they produced. Pure propaganda, right? Leni Riefenstahl, you know, is like propaganda stuff. Although Leni Riefenstahl was moderately interesting in some ways, you know, at least from a cinematic perspective. So this is groundbreaking. Holy Christ.
Yep.
I mean, her thing, what was it, the 1936 Olympics?
Yep.
And the stuff that they were doing, like putting cameras on balloons and stuff like that. And
cameras underwater following the swimmers as they're swimming. It was like, what? 1936, what? You know? Did you
she was a trip, man.
That Stanley Kubrick's brother-in-law was Leni Riefenstahl's cameraman.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yep. Yep.
I just watched The Killers for the first time 2 nights ago.
Oh, it's a great movie.
Fantastic movie.
The Killing.
The Killing, right?
Yeah, the racetrack.
The racetrack. I'm sorry, The
Oh
Killers.
my
Yeah,
God.
Killing. Yeah.
You talk about, what was he, 20, 24 when he made that? That is a work of a mature filmmaker.
What's really interesting is, I don't want to blow it for people. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. But at the end, sort of the storytelling and narrative device at the end,
Yeah.
where he goes to each and every character who's part of the heist,
Right.
and basically tracks them as they go to the track and replays that. Quentin Tarantino totally ripped that off for Reservoir Dogs.
Oh, absolutely. And well, everybody started ripping it off. It was actually a groundbreaking movie where it was really the first time that filmmakers started messing with time.
Yep.
You know, like Memento and all these other movies mess with time now, but that was the first one where you weren't actually sure which time you were in while you're watching it. Am I in? Oh, this is before the robbery. Oh, so now we're in after the robbery. Okay, now we're in the middle of the robbery, and every character had this like distinction. So every character was completely distinct from all the other characters. So you were never confused about who was who. That was what was so great about, because normally a film like that would be so confusing, but because the characters had all these distinctive things, you always knew right where you were during the film. And I highly recommend it. The Killing, I think it's 1954, Stanley Kubrick, masterpiece, absolutely a masterpiece. And
Yep.
an masterpiece.
And Sterling Hayden, who winds up having a very interesting cinematic career.
Orson Welles saw that film, and they asked him later what he thought of it, and he says, I would watch that young man who made that film.
Yeah. So anyway, when the film industry does come back, it would be the propaganda arm. Everything when it comes back will be a part of the propaganda arm,
right,
of the new world or the reset. There will be it will be.
It's already
it'll be ubiquitous. It'll be everywhere, and you won't be able to get away from it. Right?
It's already happening. There's a show on Netflix, Amazon. It's a situation comedy. I can't remember now. About a
Utopia.
Guy who dies.
Yeah. And, that guy. Yes.
Yeah, and they're soft pedaling the entire future to us.
Right.
They're telling us exactly what's going to be happening. So, and it doesn't look very much fun either. Even though
it doesn't have much fun. It's not much fun at all. But this is like, okay, well, guess what? Your lives are shit and it's boring. And, the only way you're going to get out of this thing is by participating in this alternate reality. And we'll give you the passport to that and have fun. You can be anything you want in that world, right?
So, people are pouring out of the cities. Where I live, which is a very small place, all the houses are bought. They've been bought for prices above the asking price. There's probably maybe 45 houses being built right now. Usually there's maybe 3, but there's now like 45. All of a sudden, lots that I didn't know were for sale everywhere are all for sale. And so everybody's moving out. Well, if you can, they're moving out of the cities, and they're coming into places like where I live, and we don't want them, but there's nothing we can do about it. And so doesn't that go against the Agenda 2030 plan where they want us all inside the smart cities? So doesn't that seem like, I don't know, it seems like they're going to have to pull something else off to get us to leave. I'm not leaving. So, I mean, I'm not.
So there's a couple things that have to be factored in here. Number one, if theoretically Biden becomes president and they decide to go with a version of the new Green Deal, whatever that is, and you can already see where these things are starting to take place. Like the governor of Michigan, whose name I will not mention here, has said that, it's really dangerous to pump gas from Canada underneath Lake Michigan. We're going to have to stop that. And I've already seen where the lumber from places like Montana and Oregon and Washington is stopped. like they're not really doing a whole lot of lumber orders right now, and
Yeah.
plywood is really
Prices are
expensive.
flying.
So you can buy a piece of land and you can think you're going to build. Good luck on getting the materials. That's going to be very difficult to do. And
It
if
already
they,
is. I was going to do an addition to my house, and through this whole process, I was just looking at it. You know, I got a design, and I got the initial estimate from the guy who, he's a construction guy, right? And it ended up at the end twice as much as his estimate. He's because when he had to actually go out and price it at the end for the budget, it was like, oh man, things are really skyrocketing, and I'm not going to do it. I'm like, forget it. I'm not going to spend that kind of crazy money on something that's not going to give me that kind of benefit. But so
right,
you're saying that they're going to pull some kind of trick to get us to go back in to the cities, or they're going to come and I've heard from a FEMA guy, and I shouldn't everybody needs to hear this probably. FEMA guy told me that what's going to happen is that they're going to pull the electricity, and that when they pull the electricity, they're going to wait about a week. Then they're going to go door to door and say, "Do you have food in your refrigerator?" And when they say yes, they say you have to abandon the house. It's a hazard, and that's how they're going to clear everybody out of the house. That's why I think you should get solar if you can, so that they can't pull that one on you. But it's going to be very interesting. Another thing that's going on in the rural areas is the rural hospitals are shutting down.
that's right. That's
Yeah,
another
right
thing.
here, our
Yeah,
hospital is just it may shut down actually, and then we're
that's
done.
right.
I'll have to drive 4 hours to get to a hospital, and so it's interesting. So a lot of ways, there's movement away from their plan, making their plan much more complicated, and then cities don't look very inviting anymore. So, I mean, if you can't go to the movies, you can't go out to eat, you can't go to a concert, what's the friggin' point of living in the city outside of work, And
Mhm.
even that can be remote. So I don't know. It seems like they're moving in contrary directions.
So here's what I think is going on. I think you're seeing two factions try to determine the geopolitical and geographic narrative
That's what
of the
Danny
country.
Estulin said on my show.
Yeah,
Among
you're seeing two factions, and one
two
faction,
cabals.
yeah, one. So um, I don't think he's a very trustworthy fellow, but I think he's somebody worth listening to, and that's Steve Pieczenik.
Right.
And Steve Pieczenik has openly said what is taking place. He's telling us what's taking place, and it's happening. And
Yep.
he's essentially saying that we're witnessing the Balkanization of the United States, which is what they want. They don't want the United States to be the United States anymore.
Right.
In fact, it's not. I mean, ever since Trump declared those two emergencies, one on March 13th and the other on April 13th, FEMA's been in control of this thing,
Yep.
and the states have been running their own, COVID show. There's no unified response here. So
Yep.
what Pieczenik says, and it clearly looks like this is taking place, is that the coasts are going to be pretty much like eradicated. Like they're going to make the coasts and I'm really thinking like from maybe Virginia north, because a lot of these people are in Florida, and Florida has been invested into heavily. But they want to eradicate New York. They want to eradicate New York and Boston, a lot of these other places. They don't want them to be the centers of economic power anymore. That includes Silicon Valley and Hollywood, by the way, gone. So, and you can see this, it's happening. The center of power is moving to the center and the south of the country. So here in Texas, we have Elon Musk, Joe Rogan moved here. We got a new aircraft business opening in Kerrville, which is about 30 miles away. We have no taxes. Same with Florida. You're seeing a redistribution of power in the country. So there's going to be that's a reality, right? That's one reality. The other side wants to do the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030,
That's right.
mega city model. And that would include, by the way, the coasts. Okay. So we're seeing these two power structures kind of vying for how they're going to divvy up the United States
That's
and the rest of the world as a result of that.
That's right. There's a counter cabal, and this counter cabal is is very powerful. That's all Danny Estulin said. He said they're very powerful. Don't screw around with them. They're super old families, and they don't want to change into this new thing that the cabal, the original cabal, wants. And so maybe the moving out to the country is this new cabal, you know, making us, I mean, we're pretty formidable out here, you know what I mean? We don't have any police at all here. And so everybody's on their own. And there's no crime. I mean, there's little crime, petty crime, but there's no, you know, big crime. So it's actually quite easy to live without police. I do every day.
Well,
Robert,
I think they created the dilemma. They created the crisis for the police to exist.
right.
Clearly, they created it under, you know, the underclass has always been there and will always be there. I mean, that's just the way it's been. But the X factor, what they brought into the underclass, made it even worse. We're talking drugs, hardcore drugs, really dark, illicit kinds of behaviors and
Crappy
economies.
school.
Yes, so they've have fed the underclass really toxic material, so that the underclass could essentially metastasize, right?
And you know who I blame more than almost anybody for this is the teachers unions. They don't. The teachers unions exist for the teachers, not for the kids.
That's right.
And it's just like, you know, so the teachers union gives tons and tons of money to the Democrats, and they're the ones that are raising, not educating the kids. You know, it's like they're not doing their job, and then they're keeping the status quo going.
That's
and so
right.
These poor inner city kids, they're just trapped in this nightmare. And it's just, you know, the saddest thing in the world. And I personally think that, you know, the United States should spend a lot more money on inner city education. I just really do. I think it should be like some kind of plan, like a war plan. We're going to go and we're going to give these kids education, but they're never going to do it. So I don't know.
Well, the big problem is they did an experiment with this in Kansas, where they just threw so much money at this. I forget what the school district was. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
And what they did is they proved that resources and massive amounts of resources don't always translate into higher grades, higher learning, and better education.
Yep.
So throwing money at the problem isn't really the solution. The solution is probably going back to something like, you know, the what is it, the Trivedium or Quadridium or whatever it is, like a very different kind of learning.
Yeah.
John Gatto's kind of version of education. And I would not be opposed to every kid in school wearing a freaking uniform. I'm sorry. I know this sounds completely fascistic, but they found that when kids wore the same clothes, even in inner cities, they got better grades. They got better grades. They did better. They did, you know. And to your point, I'll tell you who else is really problematic. That's the police union.
They are.
Very problematic.
Yes.
And people just have to keep in mind that they are a union, okay? And the unions are brotherhoods, right? They lock arms together. United Workers of the World, they're a union, just like the teachers union.
You're right. We'll never, who will the police side with when things get really tough here? That's a really good point. The sheriffs, I feel pretty good about, not the inner city police.
Sheriffs are okay. Depends on your sheriff.
Yeah. Well, Robert, it's been really good getting an update from you as usual. It's a little unnerving, but I mean, I think this year you were a little more optimistic than last year's. So
I actually am a bit more optimistic. Last year it was like, man, we're just have to go through this thing.
Yeah.
Now we have enough wild cards that are in the deck that I think when they get played, it's going to be interesting. It's not going to be business as usual. And the people that think they can move this thing along at a very rapid pace. And by the way, I think they're ahead of where they want to be. I don't think they want to be here, right? They're like really accelerating and putting everything out there. I think they wanted a smoother transition. And I do believe that they wanted Hillary Clinton. And I think Trump got in by a mistake. Yep, that's my sense.
Totally agree with that. It was like they thought they had it in the bag, and a bunch of unidentified voters showed up and got him over the top, and 10 million more showed up this time, but they threw the election. I'm pretty sure of that. And by the way, I don't know if it has to be a conspiracy. I know so many people with TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, that I can actually see them just seeing the ballots and throwing them away, taking a chance on it, taking a chance on committing a felony. Just the TDS has just made them crazy. I mean, I'm telling you, I have met people that are so crazy that they don't realize how hilarious they are.
Yeah. And really quick, this guy's just one story real quick. So I was at a Thanksgiving dinner 2 days ago, and one of the people who was not present called in from another country where the big riots are going on right now.
Right.
And this is a person who's I'd say upper 1%, maybe 3/4% money, works for an international corporation at a high level doing stats, data mining, all kinds of stuff, right? And has been around a lot. This person is just saying, oh yeah, well, this is what's going to happen. This is going to happen next. And this is going to happen next. And here's where the spike is going to be. We're going to have the vaccine here. And this is going to go happen, blah, blah, blah. I mean, and it's like, well, how do you know? Well, I keep informed. I watch things. It's like, okay, well, who are you watching? Right? It's the so-called experts in their head. And there are people who are so convinced like this is reality.
Oh yeah.
And you can't talk them off that line because they have doubled and tripled down on their position, and there's no turning back for these people. And they will walk that line all the way until they get to the edge of the cliff with the rest of the lemmings, and then we'll just drop off.
Yeah, it's then there's a problem of the people who actually like the lockdowns. There's actually a group of people I've discovered who really think that lockdowns are fun, and they have no idea that people are losing their jobs and getting foreclosed on. And it's like, are you kidding?
Yeah. It's like a thing. Oh God, this is great. We don't have to deal with the world, and we can order out, and we can play games, and we can play on our Xbox, and we can Zoom people. It's like, fuck, I have no interest in that world.
No at all. Okay, Robert, we're going to have you back in a few months and figure out what's going on. Thanks for being on my show.
Absolutely, Jay. My pleasure.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jay Weidner. This is Reality Check. And I want to thank all of you. I really do appreciate you. And hit like and share is supposed to be most important. So thank you very much. And I am out of here.